if we were going to continue our chord building process that we looked at a while back in building the triads, and we were to continue on, we already have got a 1, a 3, and a 5. Even I, who was never very good at those what's the next number in the sequence questions, I could probably get that if we got 1, 3, 5, probably the next one up is 7. And that's correct. We can keep on going. And so if we did that on our G chord, our 1 chord in the key of G, we've already got our 1, G, our 3rd, the B, 5 is our D. We don't play 6, which is the note E, and we do play our 7th note up, which is F sharp. And so if we add that F sharp into our G chord, this is what we get. That is very nice. If you're playing jazz tunes or something, that is a major 7th, called a major 7th, because the F sharp is the 7th note in the major scale, 11 half steps above the root of our G chord here. And that's a good tune, and we use it sometimes in country. If you're going to play the Buddy Emmons intro on the Nightlife, a series of major 7th chords, the bridge of Gary Stewart's Empty Glass, if we were playing that in G, every night for me, every night I'm in some bar, starts with that C major 7th chord. So you do use it. I don't think I've ever played it on a Western swing tune, but it's a good chord. We use it some, but the one that we want, that's the one that we want. Instead of playing F sharp, we're playing F natural there, and that's the 7th that we're looking for in this style of music. That is called a flat 7. We just call this chord a 7th chord because it's the one we're always talking about. Technically, both the major 7th and that 7th chord, the flat 7, are 7th chords, but by default we call that one a 7th chord, and if we want you to play a major 7th chord, we'll specify. This type of chord is also called a dominant 7th chord for reasons that we will see in a minute. Now what would happen if we were to do that same thing over the C chord, the 4 chord? We've got C, our root or 1, E is our 3rd, G is our 5th, skip the 6th note up A and play B, the 7th note up, and you're going to wind up with that same type of chord, a C major 7th chord. Whereas what we want, of course, is the flat 7, the B flat instead. If we were to do that on the D chord, the 5 chord, we've got D, the root, F sharp the 3rd, A is the 5th, skip the 6th note up B and play C the 7th, and looky there, we already have got our flat 7 in the chord there, and so we don't need to change anything at all when we get to the 5 chord. Now each of the notes of the scale have names. The first note there is the tonic, the 2nd note, I guess that's the supertonic, 3rd note is the mediant, the 4th note is the supertonic, and the 5th note of the major scale is called the dominant note. And therefore this type of chord, which is the same as a major chord but has a flat 7, 10 half step flat 7 on it, this is what is called a dominant 7th type chord. And so all of these chords are called dominant chords, that G7 with the F, C7 with the B flat, and the D7 with the C note in it. And so those are the notes that we want. That major 7th is a nice sound, but we want, just as an aside here, studying jazz is a wonderful thing to do, but in jazz the default 1 chord and 4 chord are those major 7th type chords, and they're going to be teaching you runs that are based upon that major 7th over both of those chords, and those are which are very nice, and you can learn some stuff from doing that, but just be mindful that in country music, where they'd be playing a major 7th chord, we would probably just be playing a triad. And so just keep that in mind when you start your jazz studies. Let's go back then and play now our triads that we learned. The G triad, C triad, and D triad, and add those flat 7s to each of those. And so there we'd be adding to our G chord, our G triad, that 7, the F natural note, 3rd fret on the D string. We also have that F note here on the B string, the 6th fret on the B string. You may find sometimes it is better, rather than playing that F note on the 6th fret of the B string, to play it down here on the 1st fret of the high E string. It may be a bit of a stretch. I added a 9th in there, A, but remember also that you've got that same F note down there on the 1st fret of the low E string, of course, so you can reach down there and get it. On the C chord, what we want to get is the B flat note, which is the 3rd fret on the G string, and also the 6th fret on the E string. So you want to add that. And you also have got that B flat note down here, the 1st fret of the A string, and you also have it here on the 6th fret of the low E string. And so on the D chord, our D triad, the flat 7 is the C note, the 5th fret of the G string, right there in the chord form. Also there, the 3rd fret of the A string. And so the thing to do now would be to run those up and down a few times, do our playing melody with arpeggio kind of thing a little bit. And so on. Now, let's go back now to our major pentatonic scales on G, C, and D, and add that same flat 7 into those major pentatonic scales. And so you already know where the F is there, and you know on the G chord. You know where it is here on the C and the D. But if you add that, take a few minutes to figure it out, and add that to the pentatonic scale, each of those major pentatonic scales, you get something like that. Now you got something that sounds pretty darn good. Pretty darn good. In reviewing that last segment, I realize I mistakenly called 2 notes the supertonic. The second note of the scale is called the supertonic. Tonic, supertonic. 3rd note's the median. The 4th note is the subdominant that I miscalled before. 5th note's the dominant. The 6th note is called the superdominant or submediant. The 7th note is called the subtonic or leading tone, and then we're back to tonic. Just wanted to make that correction.